Merry Christmas, scholars. Mr. Durnan here with a couple of thoughts about Slaughterhouse Five, which I'm going to guess some of you have put out of your minds, but I need to put back into your minds because we all need to read this book to keep our literary quest moving through the vacation. So, a couple of thoughts on Slaughterhouse Five, and then I'll leave you to your vacation. I hope you have been able to secure a copy. If not, every library in America has this thing. So libraries open back up today. It's Monday, and you can just slip over to your local library and check it out. Your friends and your friends' parents own it. This book is everywhere, so you should be able to find a copy of it and not necessarily have to buy it, although I had a delightful afternoon in Boston seeking it out and found a good used copy. Uh, Slaughterhouse Five. I want not to go on too much today. Just I want to give you a brief introduction and just convince you to open the cover because once you start reading this thing, this is an old cover of it here with a soldier in winter. Once you start reading this thing, you read the whole thing in a hurry. It's a quick, an extremely quick read. It will take you a couple of hours, maybe three, and they'll be fun hours, better than any movie you ever saw. Okay, Kurt Vonnegut, if you don't know of him, is an iconic American writer. He died earlier this decade. I think he died in 2007. All the more reason to honor him by reading his greatest work this year. He did fight in World War II, and we'll hear about his experiences. So he died an old man on Cape Cod. The book is, I'm going to say on the next slide, iconoclastic. It shatters expectations in all kinds of ways, and this first line is often quoted among the great first lines of American novels. And he says all this really happened, more or less. The war parts anyway are pretty much true, and they are. He lived through one of the more horrific episodes in American history, and that is at the center of this book. Although this book is also filled with all kinds of science fiction and crazy, deliberate craziness. So when he starts us off saying all this really happened, more or less, it's it's a kind of a playful riff, I think, on a book that has much that didn't actually happen surrounding this horror that is at its core, the bombing of the firebombing of Dresden. Um, yeah, iconoclastic. I don't know if you know this word. Let's see if this thing works. But iconoclastic, great word. You know what icons are? Icons are people like Lady Gaga, who have cultural weight and importance. They don't need to be morally significant, but they need to be culturally significant. This classed part of the word means to break. Oh, I should have thought of a good cognate, and I can't pull one out of the air. But so an iconoclast takes a kind of culturally important statue or icon and shatters it, right? So the icon that Vonnegut will be shattering in his novel is the very notion of the American novel and its linear narrative nature. So you can see from the first sentence that Vonnegut disarms us in saying, well, this is a novel, but it's mostly true actually, which is just a kind of a variation on expectations. Here's another really good instance in the first paragraph, bottom of page 40, or a couple pages in, and he says to his buddy, the climax of this book is going to be the death of one of their friends. And you just don't tell people what the climax of your book is, right? That's supposed to be the climactic surprise. And he, already on page, the third page of the novel, is disclosing this. So it's different, and I think educational to us, informative, revealing, in ways that make this book well worth our reading. Here's just a final instance of this. Chapter 1, which really is a sort of introduction, begins, this is all just quotation. He calls himself a failure, since it was written by a pillar of salt. If you don't get that biblical reference, you will by the end of paragraph 1. So he ends the first paragraph by saying, here's how the novel begins. This is the beginning of chapter 2 here. Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. He says, and it ends like this, Pooty-weet, the call of a bird. And this is, in fact, if you scroll to the end of the book, this is the last word of the book. So he one thing, and I don't know if we'll hear an interview with Vonnegut, but he says, I try to take anything that will be surprising in a novel and reveal it. That's one of his operating principles. Oh, are we already here? Yeah. Okay. Well, also significant about Vonnegut's language is its conversational nature, its deliberate, unstuffy, unprofessorial nature. You'll read the line, so it goes, this one here, so it goes. You'll read it time and time again. In fact, every time someone or a group of people die in this book, the next sentence will be, so it goes. And you'll see this on t-shirts now for the rest of your life because this is a t-shirtable book. So there are two sides to Vonnegut. I mean, the guy was brilliant and a really intelligent artist, creative artist. But and part of his creativity is smashing things that he found to be stuffy. So you'll find on page 3 or 4 a raunchy lyric. There was a young man from Istanbul that does use the word tool in an anatomical way. And also throughout, you'll find that there's this self-referentiality. It's particularly prominent in the first chapter where Vonnegut's talking about the writing of this book and the trouble he had writing this book. Here, you get a message to his publisher. It says, there's nothing intelligent to say about a massacre, Sam. There's his publisher. Uh-oh, I'm running out of time. Oh, this is perfect. Gotta hurry now. He hits some moments that are historically relevant and culturally relevant. He's in a hotel room and he reads a poem by Theodore Rathke, who's one of America's great 20th century poets. Um, a word about the history of the war. This is World War II, and the firebombing of Dresden is going to take place in Dresden. There you have it. There's another reference to the very end of the war on the Elbe River, and it's going to be right about here by Leipzig. There's a place called Halle, Halee, and you'll see that in the first paragraph. But anyway, here you are, right? There's Czech Republic, home of Fabian, right? And we got the Netherlands, home of Willem. It's Northern Europe, and a lot of World War II took place here. I hope some of you know more about World War II than I do and can fill in some of this backdrop. You get it in Chapter 1, Vonnegut makes clear how serious he sees this event in Dresden, and I think historians agree that Dresden was worse in terms of devastation and human loss than Hiroshima, which is just horrifying, right? There's a church in Dresden, a church that was blown to bits during the firebombing and has been rebuilt, I believe. And you'll hear some talk of Dresden, as I said, in Chapter 1. What else is there to say? I'm almost to the end here. It's a little cartoon by Vonnegut. This is his self-portrait here, sharp-nosed, curly-haired Kurt Vonnegut from 1993. In fact, the cover of the book that we have this is Vonnegut. That's a Vonnegut cartoon. So he is a visual artist and did some, I don't know how important that work is, not as important as his literary work, but he is an artist, and we'll note that. He does a cartoon late in the book that will crack you up. As you get to Chapter 2, once you get through Chapter 2, then the pages really start turning. You'll get to Chapter 2 when Billy Pilgrim comes unstuck in time. Now that you're smart literary analysts, you see the name Billy Pilgrim, and it should bring you right back to whom? For me, to the character in B. Crudgington's short story named Grace, but for all of us, I think, to young Goodman Brown, right? There is in this pilgrim, Billy Pilgrim, he's on a pilgrimage, right? He's on a great human pilgrimage for meaning. So there's that. He does. It's called Ilium in Slaughterhouse Five, but Ilium is another name for Troy, the original Troy, where there was the war and Odysseus, found his way in with the Trojan horse. Really, Vonnegut grew up here in Troy, which is on that kind of. Many of you have traveled that corridor right there, the New York Thruway, looking at all those great colleges that are along there. Anyway, that's where he begins. You will see him down here in Massachusetts and in Cape Cod throughout the course of the book, but that's the American geography. And that's my introduction. I'll read away with you. I've just started it myself, or restarted it, and I confess, I'm middle-aged. I forgot many of the details, but it's a good book. It's a great book, and fun to read, and when we get back together, it will be fun to knock around a wee bit. So let me know if you have any concerns about your reading of it. Shout out to Alex Poor, whom I know has purchased this book, and we're psyched to have him back in class, and I will see you all in a week. Cheers.